when you talk about the word stress, it's a generally loosely used term. It means a verb, it means a noun, it means various things. So, but for the purposes of this discussion with respect to stress, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. So you see how broad it is, according to the definition. So that means that there could be external stresses, things that affect us externally, or there could be internal stresses, things that affect us internally, that we would consider stressful and then would define as a stress. The other point also is that all of us are different. So whatever someone might find challenging, another person might not, or might handle it differently. And I think sometimes that's where also there's a challenge with respect to recognition of when someone is undergoing a difficult challenge mentally extra. The difficulty of recognition from those who are with the person and can actually see and observe the person. It's not like then you can see the person has, for want of a better example, a fractured leg or broken leg. No. But the person looks okay, physically okay, but they are going through certain emotional challenges which are not necessarily manifest. And again, for those who are either working or who will be either working for themselves or work with other colleagues or also employ people, one of the challenges is having understanding of what your colleague or what your employee is actually going through. And again, one can use the practical example of, I mean, if you went out and you were in a car accident and you had a fracture, or if you had a temperature and had malaria, you can measure the temperature, etc. But it's almost impossible to measure what someone is going through, whether they are going through a divorce, which is a stressful situation, whether they are going through pregnancy, which again, I'm sure the women in here will identify whether you're going through. Pregnancy is a very stressful situation. Moving from one home to another, or moving from one city to another, it's a very stressful situation. Starting a new a new course, going to a new campus is a very stressful situation. It's a very stressful situation, and it imposes a stress on you who is involved in that situation. So, as you can see, it's a very broad term or field. Now, we, for whatever reason, we loosely apply it to mental health situations because of the stigma associated with mental health. People want to find a nice way or a nice word or a nice way of mentioning it or presenting it and saying, oh, this person is stressed. But that's a broad term that is used. But again, depending on what symptoms you are manifesting. For example, some people, when they are undergoing a challenge or difficult situation, it starts to affect their sleep. They sleep much less. Some people incidentally sleep a lot more. Of course, if you oversleep and you are supposed to be at lectures, what's going to happen is that you're going to miss the lecture, and that in itself is going to cause other challenges. So just giving a broad overview. I also, again, in terms of putting a presentation together, I mean, this is the first time we're meeting. We're told that there are students full-time, and there are some people who are working extra. So we all come from different experiences, different backgrounds. So we would rather, again, and nobody should be shy or feel like they cannot contribute or talk, but it will make a lot more practical sense if you can share some of your experiences with us, and then we can interact. And again, important thing is to identify or help with coping strategies, or with even identifying the stressful situation and how to help deal with it. So can I just take the liberty, and then there was a lady before we started. She was on her phone, and then she also smiled at me, and I don't know whether she was taking a picture of me on the phone. But again, just a simple example. Look, cell phones are stressful, whether we like them or not. They are part of our lives right now, but they also they almost impose a certain restriction, obligation, whatever, so stresses come in different ways. Some people cannot do without looking at their phone or their WhatsApp every 5 minutes. Some, so these are realities. We are almost 30 million in Ghana, and look, a lot of things are changing. A lot of things are changing daily. A lot of things have changed from when we were 5 or 6 million at independence and extra. Now, one of the things that we continue to pretend or ignore is mental health, emotional and mental health issues. But our population numbers have grown, so will the challenges that it comes with. I mean, nowadays, again, if we even use the exposure to the cell phone as an example, there's just so many different interruptions and pressures on our lives, such that, again, identifying them, but also accepting that, this thing is actually creating a problem or a concern. And then thirdly, looking for help, knowing where to find the help, whether it is through your faith base, whether it is through, again, professional, but we should accept that these challenges and these problems exist, because they exist everywhere and they are real. And of course, then we've got to learn how to do something about them. I'll just hand over to my colleague, Madam Ethel. I suppose she would also bring a different perspective.
My name is Ethel, and I'm a clinical psychologist. Right, so Dr. Mfojo touched on a number of things, and I would like to take up from there. I think from what we heard so far, we know that stress, it's used loosely. All right, everybody, I'm under stress. This thing is too stressful. But there's a lot more to stress. But at the same time, stress is not objective, it's very subjective. in that we're different people coming from different backgrounds. The examples that were given suggest that, we have different experience on a daily basis. There are those that are married, there are those that are not. Even those that are married, number of children might differ. Maybe you might have children that are calmer or not. Maybe they're older or not. It's the same thing with the husbands. Maybe they're even helpful at home. Probably you have a few hands to help at home. So there are a number of things, that go on with all of us. And for that reason, stress is very subjective. And that's because, like I mentioned, there's individual difference. Now, the other bit is that what I would consider stressful might not be stressful to the next person. Sometimes I just wonder, I have just one child. And I'm under a lot of stress, just trying to manage. All right. But then I have colleagues that have maybe 3 or 4. And it seems life is a breeze. All right. So it's like sometimes you wonder, how is this person able to manage? How are they coping? And then they will come and talk about something else not related to family. And that is their stress. And I go like, but this one is not stressful. So that should tell you something, that stress in itself is very subjective and it differs, from person to person. Now, anytime we talk about stress, we're also thinking of very negative things, like, connote something negative. But we do have good stress. And stress is necessary for us as human beings. Now, good stress is what we call eustress, because that helps, it pushes you to do things. I mean, there was no pressure on you as an individual. You'll be very laid back. You'll probably do things at your own time. But then once you're in an institution, it means that you have timelines or deadlines to meet. Then you have lecturers that will come in who actually would stress you out. How they're even going to communicate information is like, stressful already. And then you have to manage and, balance that with, life outside. So all of that, affects us as human beings. But it can be good stress. Then we have bad stress, which is what we call distress. All right, so stress in itself is not necessarily bad, and there is good stress. Example, wedding. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, isn't it? Wedding. Oh, you disagree? Oh, well. But, okay, well. But, of course, I mean, it's a good thing anyways. So, okay, fine. So that also depends. But for what it is, it's a good thing. Getting married is a good thing. It's like transition. Not necessarily for females. I mean, the men also get happy. I mean, knowing that they're tying the knot with somebody they love. But, at the same time, it can be stressful when you are planning or the one that is paying or financing. It can be. All right. So it's not all bad, like I was saying. Then it's important that for us as human beings, we learn to cope or balance. Once you're in school, you're in school. So whether you're a mother, whether your husband has passed, whatever the reason is, once you're in the institution, all of those things are not considered by external factors. All they're expected, or you are expected to do, is perform. So then how do you manage, how do you balance? There are things called stressors. These are things that cause the stress. Now, stressors can be internal or external, like Dr. Mfojo mentioned. So internal would be maybe some negative thoughts you have about yourself, your abilities, maybe certain beliefs, which are very wrong. And then we have the external ones, which have to do with, things that, like school, like the lecturer, like traffic. We're about 30 million now. And most of the time when you're a student, you would love to have a ride because it's supposed to make life easier. How many of us drive here? Can I see by hands how many of us drive? We have our own vehicles. Now tell me that it's not stressful driving. Thank you. So that also causes stress. So even though it seems as if, they've gotten something that can help them manage, it is still stressful. So then stress, like I said, is very subjective. It can be good and then it can be bad. But the most important thing is that we need to learn to manage and then balance. You also need to identify what your stress is. Could it be a boyfriend? A loved one? Maybe it's the lecture, the particular, course, or the lecturer. It could be anything. You need to identify Once you identify, then you'll be able to, deal with or manage. You have to adapt, you have to accept, you have to adjust. And that's the only way you can actually manage the stresses when they come. Additionally, moving on, there are so many things one can do. Now, if it has to do with a school, and maybe you're full-time schooling and then working, maybe you might have to do part-time. Because I wouldn't tell you to stop work, because you might also need the money to, finance the schooling. Sometimes you could also meet with your advisor or a lecturer, communicate with them, let them know. And the other thing is sometimes, when we're having these challenges and it's more of an external issue, if you don't tell someone, they won't know what's going on with you. So like Dr. Mfojo said, you might have a broken arm. That's very, obvious. Everybody can see that. But with stress, you can't see it. Except that, maybe the person is sleeping too much or sleeping too little, probably very irritated, moody. Of course, you might get some headaches. And these are things that happen when one is stressed. So in terms of identifying or getting to know what is going on with you, sometimes they would actually come off as physical symptoms. So the headaches or tension headaches you're getting, you're not sleeping well. Maybe you sleep, you wake up, you don't feel rested and all that. These are all things that can actually be stress, but you might think it's something else. So when these things happen, if someone can help you, approach that person, open up and talk to them, let them know what's going on with you. Get some suggestions from them so that you know how to balance. Maybe you might have to be given some extra time, and I'm sure that the schools would make accommodation for some challenges or difficulties that we face. So that is very important. Then the other bit is, in terms of moving on, or when it comes to stress, it's very important for us to know that, it's good to eat well. But sometimes when we're stressed, we don't feel like eating. It's important to have good eating habits. It's important to also get good rest. Because once your body is well rested, you're able to think clearly, you feel better, and be able to think clearly and manage, the challenges that you face on a daily basis. Exercise, which is not part of our culture. Very important. Swimming, going about. You don't necessarily have to hit the gym. Maybe you can just take a, stroll, or probably just, jog about your own home. Very, very important as well. And these are general things that no matter who you are, in terms of dealing with your stress, these are things you can do. So eat well, rest enough, exercise. Sometimes those who are into yoga or meditation, this helps as well. So get yourself into things like that, and they would help. Then the other bit, like I mentioned, would be to communicate with somebody. Tell somebody what's going on. So if it's your lecturer that you have to meet to discuss certain things, maybe you have a deadline, you weren't able to meet it. They're humans. Approach them, talk to them, and explain that this is what's going on. Probably you lost somebody, and that has affected you immensely. Let them know what's going on. Then maybe they probably could give you some time, a different time or a different schedule to submit your assignments or dissertation or whatever it is that's going on. So I hope that regarding the talks we've had concerning stress, at least these are basic things that can help you as an individual. And if there are any questions, I think that we'll take them from here, because we want to make it as interactive as possible. Thank you very much.
I have a question. Yes. She gave a classical example that she's in the class with so I think the perfect and an example, you are not going to tell her to stop, right? How does she manage? Yeah.
So you have a partner. You're in the same class. You're virtually everywhere with this person, and then there are some restrictions. And I think one thing you said was that there's okay, so he's not allowing you to communicate with other, but you should have your limits. But really, when you're in a relationship, there are limits, aren't there? Yes. So when you say knowing how, then does it mean that maybe you are also not Because, I mean, that talks of, you know, some respect. Once you're in a relationship that has been defined, of course, there must be certain barriers in place. I mean, I can go out with friends, including meals, and there's nothing wrong with that. After all, we're not married. There's nothing wrong with that. But then, I mean, if you realize that maybe you're going beyond and probably spending a lot more time with, that's a cause of concern. So what exactly do you mean? Then we can help you better. Okay. Is he controlling? No. But, okay.
She mentioned insecurity.
Insecurity. All right. So, okay. Right. So means these are the challenges then. One is insecurity. Has anything happened in his past that has actually brought out this kind of insecurity? Or maybe there's been an incident before, you know, with you where something happened and that has made him insecure. It's from his past, not from you. Right. So in such a situation, we realize or we know what the problem is. That is insecurity. It means that maybe something happened in his past and trust was broken. So it means that you have to make sure that you earn his trust or maintain. And that would mean communicating a lot more. Basically, that is it. Trust is something that is built. How long have you been together? Yeah, that's like very early. Okay, so that's like still the honeymoon phase. Okay, so that's like the still honeymoon phase. Very early. Right, and it still means you're getting to know each other. Right, so early days, it means that you have to be open about a lot of things. You have to communicate as much as possible with this person and let them earn the trust. Let them gain your trust. That's the only way. One of the other things you have to also remember is be consistent. Consistency teaches all of us something. That once I know that, you know, A is always like this, there's no way they're actually going to disappoint me. They've been disappointed before, and for whatever reasons there were, trust was broken. So it might be difficult for him to just trust you. I mean, you just met. So it's going to take time, but you have to be consistent and you have to also communicate as much as possible and be open about a lot of things. Yes. Okay. Now, when we say communication, that's another thing. It doesn't mean talking plenty. But it means speaking to the person for them to understand what's going on and being plain about it. It doesn't mean explain and give reasons. Sometimes that would even make someone wonder why you're explaining plenty. For example, I'll be here at this time. I'll see you when I get back. I'm going out with this and that, A and B. So that when somebody sees it and calls him, oh, I saw her somewhere, but she was with this and that. But she didn't say she was going with this and that. Oh, I went. So it's basically that. Just, you know, communicate things as they are. Just say them as they are. But you don't have to talk plenty in trying to explain yourself. Now, there's something that I want you to take note of, which is very, very important regarding stress. Now, there's the acute one, and then we also have the chronic stress. Acute is something that could happen suddenly, you know, and it's like very intense. Now, in that situation, it's something that is kind of a one-off, but that you can actually manage. Like you have to meet a deadline today. You can still find a way and manage. But with the acute stress as well, somebody could have a heart attack. But the more dangerous one is the chronic one, because sometimes you don't even realize it's there. Because it's like it's become a part of us. Maybe financial issues, marital issues, all of it together. And then you go to work and your boss is also bugging you, and then you come to class and then your lecturer is on you all the time. Now, all of this, it gets to that point where the body cannot take it anymore. It becomes chronic. You know, you're just in the situation, just going with the flow. Now, in such instances, like I said, you could have some headaches, you could have all kinds of body aches and pains, you're not sleeping well, you're unable to function maybe at your best. Now, when it gets there, it's important you get to talk to somebody. We hope that doesn't get there. We're making you, gain some knowledge or have some insight so you know what is happening to you when certain things start happening that were not there before. And like I mentioned, some of them actually would translate into physical things. So physical or health conditions, diabetes, obesity, hypertension. Stress can actually do that, yes. It does. Yes, as a result of stress. So these are health things, but then the main cause or what actually pushed or triggered would be stress. So when we talk of stress, it's a huge thing, it's a big thing. And I think that we shouldn't just take it as it is. Then one thing I want to talk about is that sometimes when we're having certain challenges in class or in school, we're students here. Sometimes, I don't know whether we've heard of dyslexia or learning disabilities. Most of them go unnoticed because in our environment, a lot of things, we can actually, find a way to hide under a lot of things or mask certain things. We would find a way and struggle with school, senior high school, university. But we get to university or probably, from the higher levels, and then we are struggling a lot more. At times you're seeing, the words turn the other way. Sometimes you just can't read. But then you find ways of covering it up or masking it. These are also real. And these are things that there's help for. So dyslexia, dyscalculia, all kinds of challenges as well. And these are also a mental health issue because they have to do with neurological challenges. How the brain is wired is a little different from maybe the next person. So it means that your way of learning or your way of being taught should be a little different so that you can grasp, what's going on. But it doesn't mean that you are not intelligent. So it's important that when there are issues, like I said, talk to someone. It's not everything that is spiritual that we have to go and see the pastors about. Some of it, you need to go and talk to a professional, somebody that can help you. So I wish that we're able to do that. I hope that we're able to do that from today. Sexual issues, we encourage it. And I'm happy Dr. Mfojo brought it up because it seems to be a cultural thing. It's going on whether we like it or not. We are having sex. We are. Yes, we are. That would have to do with internal, challenges or internal stresses that we create for ourselves. And this one would have to be with beliefs. So it's more of a spiritual or cultural thing. We've been taught that, until you get married, you're not supposed to have sex. If you have sex, you've sinned. It's a big thing against God and you're going to die and go to hell. Things like that. We've been indoctrinated to a large extent. And so the moment we do it, then the guilt comes in. And then we feel stressed about that because once we've sinned, in quotes. And then maybe sometimes you feel like, God is against us. You go and tell a pastor about it. They'll say all kinds of things about it. If you want to redeem yourself, you have to do this, fast and pray for a number of, go to the pastor, he would baptize you, he would do all kinds of things to wash away the sin. You understand? So, this is the truth. And this is the truth. And that is why we feel the guilt we feel, because we've been indoctrinated. And this is something that has gone on over time. So in something like this, you just cannot shrug it off. That I just had sex, I'm not married, and then I feel bad, especially the women. We feel so bad about it because we also have this thing in our culture, women, we are used. It's easier to say, once the guy sleeps with you, he has used you. But once we've slept together, we have used each other. You understand? Yes, we both enjoyed, so it's like a beneficial something. So it all has to do with the beliefs, the wrong beliefs we have about sex and, so many other things that create unnecessary stress. So fine, I'm a Christian and, I went to have sex. Maybe my belief is that it's not the right thing. I've had it. If I'm feeling stressed about it, it means I have to probably go and see somebody and talk to them, but not your pastor. Because your pastor is going to come from that skewed angle where you have sinned, you're a sinner. Go to a neutral person. So that will be a practitioner, maybe a psychologist, counselor, somebody you can talk to. If it's something you don't want to engage in, then we look for ways of dealing with. But for whatever has happened, that one has already happened. There's nothing we can do to undo it. It's already happened. So moving on, what are the things we can do? We can still have a good relationship. That is, if both of you don't want to engage, we can still have a good relationship without having or engaging in sex again. So that would mean some kind of therapy for the couple. We consider it a problem, or coming from that perspective as psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health practitioners, it becomes a problem when it interferes with work. And they're able to do, what is expected of them on a daily basis. So instead of, like Doctor said, instead of going to school or instead of going for this very important meeting, he would stay home and have sex. Then it becomes a problem. But other than that, we all have different sexual drives. There are some that would love it all the time. There are some that will love it a little. There are some that are in between. We're different. So maybe it's not necessarily an addiction that is in his case. It could just be that he has a lot more in terms of his sexual drive. It's like really high.